Welcome to part 2 of Jewish Physicist Responds, Age of the Universe. So we're going to share now the 5 options that a Jew has when something in the Torah, at least on the surface, seems to contradict a scientific extrapolation. Again, we said that there's no actual scientific observation that the Torah contradicts, and it didn't have to be so, if you think about it. So we're going to talk about scientific extrapolation. What happens when the Torah disagrees with such a thing? And so option A is to reinterpret the Torah. So according to one end of the rabbinical spectrum, this is 100% an option. And others would say it's an option only in certain cases, meaning where there is an indication within the Torah that something is not just the pshat, something's not surface level, but rather there's deeper layers, there's something deeper to look into. There's a lot of pretty significant reinterpretations that Gedolim have made that, meaning the Torah in these places where there might be differences between what the Torah says and the scientific extrapolation. So often there's indications. For example, the Ramban by the Mosaica Press, by creation, he says that it's sewed. It's this whole deep thing, and we can't look at it and just think we understand stam what it means. All of the Mosaica Press is like shrouded in mystery. It has all of these deep levels, and Kabbalistically there's so much there. And so certainly, how the universe began, there is, there's for sure a side to say that, the world is 13 billion years old. And so the Rambam, from what I understand, does say that a day is a day. And so within the Rambam, one is going to have to explore these other options, and we're going to see them here. So option B. So one, the science could be wrong, right? This is the other simple option. One was that reinterpret the Torah. The next is, so to say, reinterpret the science, right? To say that the science is wrong, but if they would do things right, eventually the answer is going to converge to what the Torah says. And sometimes this turns out to be true, right? We thought that the world had been around forever, and then suddenly we find in recent years that the world has a beginning. The thing is, we tend to forget that there's such a thing of science, changing. Right, in every generation, science is right because it is what we have. But when something changes in the science, so we change our extrapolations, and it's not so public, right? These things just sort of happen. It used to be that we would talk about how an asteroid destroyed the dinosaurs, and now it's actually different theories that are predominant. And these things sort of, our understanding of the past and extrapolations in the science, they really do change over time. And it's just that in every generation we kind of think that we're right. It's like the Enlightenment culture that we had. It's like in every generation we think, this is the modern world. Like we really figured it out. Our ways to investigate the world are the best. Historically we're at the highest point in time, and this is the peak. This is the climax. But often that's not the case, Like I have a bias now to think that, science has kind of figured things out in general, and we're pretty sure about a lot of things. Some things it could be, we are sure about, it would seem, but there's other things that certainly will change in time, and I think, we have to overcome this modern world bias, of always thinking this is the modern age. And I'll give you an example of how this tends to happen. So, when I was in graduate school, when I was just starting out, starting my PhD, we, my advisor and I were working on a project for remote detection of different things, radiation. So we were looking at xenon, which the nuclear spin of xenon, it was understood to have a very long lifetime. There is a famous paper from 30-40 years prior by William Happer at Princeton, where he did this beautiful calculation. It was a theoretical calculation where he showed how the nuclear spin of xenon stays around for a long time, and meaning you could polarize it, and it's going to it's going to stick around, and you'll be able to interact with it over that time. And so we did, I presented on something about xenon at the conference. and using xenon atoms, which naturally occur in the air, to try to detect things remotely using a laser. And so then afterwards, a MIT professor comes up, and he starts talking about different things, and he mentioned xenon and the nuclear spin of xenon, and he gives a number, which is 10 to the 5 off, 5 orders of magnitude off from what from what Happer wrote and from what I spoke about and what everybody had spoken about. 10 to the 5th. This is 100,000. That's a pretty big number, And so I asked, I said, look, there's this paper by Happer, and it says this is the number. And so you know what he did? He shrugged. He said, we measured it. Right, and this is how we have to, treat our scientific extrapolations, to know this is the best we can do with our theories. But until a person actually measures it, so a person's confidence in the physics and in the science has to be moderate. And so this is one approach. This is the approach to just reject the scientific extrapolation and to say, look, the science is wrong right now. Give it time, and maybe it'll converge to to what it should be. And these are the first two. So A and B. These are the first two ways to understand what happens when the Torah and a scientific extrapolation disagree. The third concept is to say that the Torah is correct and the science is correct. This is the third approach, to say such a thing. But that only the Torah is true. Meaning that the science, it's not like they're going to keep looking and come to a different answer. Really, it's where it's supposed to be, and this is how Hashem wanted it. But that really only the Torah is true. And so this concept of the world as billions of years old, but really the world created at a certain, the world was created, say, less than 6,000 years ago, but created with a history. So that would be that would fit into this category of approach C. Meaning to say that it's not that the science is doing things wrong. It's just that this thing in the past that we're seeing, this is not reality, right? Not reality. There's different manifestations of C. One is to suggest that the world changed discontinuously. And it's interesting because the Torah actually indicates in several places discontinuous changes in nature. And the Rishonim speak about it. The Ran, the R Aryeh, the Ibn Ezra. They say that there's discontinuity in the laws of nature at the flood, for example. Right? And the Ramban, the Sforno, they speak about discontinuity in the natural conditions at the flood. And this is really a concept that we have. And Ramosha Meiselman speaks about points of discontinuity in nature, meaning we have sort of our scientific reality now, and then there's a different reality corresponding to the era of the flood, when the flood was actually happening. And before that, there's another sort of reality. And then if you go all the way back to the time of Adam and Chava, when people were speaking with animals, so to say, so that was a different reality. That was a different era, and there were discontinuous changes in the laws of nature. And so sometimes, a person, by nature, is not going to like this answer initially, right? Because we look at the world and everything seems continuous, right? We go to the store and we write something with a pencil, and then we pick something up and we walk it back and drive meter by meter by meter home. Everything seems sort of continuous, but that's actually only because we have a bias toward these things that we generally observe in life, whereas science itself is actually quite discontinuous. In fact, the amount of discontinuity within physics, within the natural laws, is tremendous. I'll give you some examples. Right, so the photoelectric effect. So a person, sends laser light at a metal, and nothing happens. And then you go to a lower and lower wavelength, a higher and higher frequency, right? You start to change the color of the light, and suddenly electrons start shooting off of the metal. What happened, right? You were doing the same thing for a period of time, and nothing changed. There was nothing happening, and then bam! All of a sudden, electrons start shooting off the metal. So this is a discontinuity. And it relates to the fact that quantum mechanically, an atom is discontinuous. You have these different energy levels, and so a person turns on a light switch. So that in itself is sort of discontinuous, right? It goes from off to on to off. we're used to it, so we don't think of it as discontinuous. But depending on the light bulb, what's happening, so it could be, you have a certain gas, say neon gas. You have neon gas in your light outside of a restaurant, and you turn on the light switch, and all of a sudden you had neon gas, which before it could have been for 50 years. It was in a state of rest, in its ground state, and then all of a sudden you send some electricity through it, and then bam, you cause all of the atoms, all of the electrons in the atoms to jump up into an excited state, from energy level 0 to energy level 1. And there's not a continuity between these levels. There's no in between, like part way from ground state to excited state. No, it's really, you go from one state to the next. And then what happens, you have all of these excited atoms, and they have all this energy, and now they have to get rid of it. So they jump back down to the ground level state, and they release light, which the color of that light corresponds to the difference in the energy between these two levels. And all of the atoms emit at exactly the same color. Right? So this is discontinuity. Other examples, phase transitions, when you're going from a solid to a liquid to a gas, or straight from a solid to a gas. These are things where discontinuity happens. Activation energy in chemistry. You need a certain temperature, a certain amount of energy, depending on the system, to be able to have such a reaction occurring for two molecules, two chemicals to interact and to form this third product. And it's throughout all of nature. Discontinuity is very common. And it always looks like nothing's changing and everything's totally constant. And then bam, it just changes. And so this is, a person can suggest discontinuity in nature, and that is sort of another way to understand this. Meaning, if things had been continuous, that 13 billion years, for example, is what it would look like. But the world is discontinuous. The properties of nature changed at the time of the flood, say. And so before that, we can't make any extrapolation. We just don't know what the laws of nature were. And there's other ways to understand this approach C, this concept that the Torah is correct and the science is correct, but only the Torah is true. So what are some other ways to understand it? So one can talk about, different realms of existence, right? And there's different ways to understand it, but I'll give you some of the sources which support this idea. So one was all the Rishonim who speak about discontinuity at the time of the flood. Another one is the Ramban says that Hashem created a strong wind during the crossing of the sea in order that the Egyptians would think that the sea splitting was a natural thing. And so then they'd, follow after the Jews. So this was Hashem making something appear a certain way in order to get a certain message across. So it sounds like falsehood, but we see in the Rishonim that this is one of the ways that Hashem engages with people in the world in a way that it might seem is dishonest. And so we'll talk about, is Hashem tricky? Right? I'll give you a little hint. Yaakov Avinu, Ish HaEmes, the man of truth. So a lot of his life he was tricking people. And I think it's really in order that Hashem should bring about truth. So similarly with chesed, Hashem wants a giving world. So Hashem makes people in need of kindness, so to say, acts in a way that's not kind, to cause us to take the initiative and to become kind. So same with the truth, that Hashem can act sometimes in a way that is tricky in order that those who aren't doing things right, they're going to end up getting tricked. But those who really are looking at the world in a Torah way and in a true scientific way, so people who look at the world in such a way, are going to become Ovdei Hashem. And next example. So Rashi, he talks about how Hashem assigned the sun and the moon to be deities. He says this in Bereshis, meaning he made it look that the sun and the moon had like a strength of their own, so to say, and it was going to cause people to slip up and to start worshiping them. And this is what Hashem wanted. Again, we said perpetual creation, Hashem creating the world at every moment. Hashem also offers in Tainus Chafhei to recreate history for an early Amora. The Amora was poor, so Hashem said, let me recreate the world and you'll be wealthy. It's just like Stam, Hashem can recreate the world. There are spiritual forces of impurity that are brought into this world via Kshafim. So Rav Hirsch says that Kshafim means deceivers or kazavim, liars. They're forces which contradict the heavenly legion and appear to have their own power. And so this really is a concept. Just a couple other examples. Hashem allows a false prophet to perform miracles. And the Egyptians, they were able to perform different miraculous things, with the snake. the staff turning into a snake. We enjoy things in the world that are damaging to us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There's sort of a certain falsehood that exists in the world. Olam hazeh, finally, is called Olam hasheker, right? This world is called the world of falsehood. The next world is Olam ha'emes, we say. If the person says they've entered Olam ha'emes, the world of truth. So this is the third approach, which says that the Torah is correct and the science is correct, but only the Torah is true. So now our fourth option, the Torah is correct and the science is correct, and both are true. So it's a very interesting thing. So either we're going to deal with different realms of reality or different facets of reality, but each of which is totally true. There's different approaches that one can take. For example, this approach can overlap with approach A, which was to reinterpret the Torah. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says science is about explanation. Religion is about meaning. Science analyzes, religion integrates. Science breaks things down to their component parts. Religion binds people together in relationships of trust. Science tells us what is, religion tells us what ought to be. Science describes, religion beckons, summons, calls. Science sees objects, religion speaks to us as subjects. Science practices detachment, religion is the art of attachment, self to self, soul to soul. Science sees the underlying order of the physical world, religion hears the music beneath the noise. Science is the conquest of ignorance, religion is the redemption of solitude. So this is Jonathan Sachs, that's all, and so that's one option. Another is B. This concept can overlap with our second approach. Remember, the second approach was to say that the science is wrong. So here we would say that the physical world without an observer really has no intrinsic existence, meaning our transient physical understanding of the world and our experience of it is really just a metaphor. Everything is just like a metaphor to teach us these spiritual concepts, and the world itself really has no existence on its own. Rav Dessler speaks about this concept in the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And there's another, a person can take C, right, which was our third approach, which was that the science is correct and the Torah is correct, but only the Torah is true. A person can sort of, say that true versus correct, like it's sort of artificial. It's how much we're taking seriously this science as a reality, and so there's a certain overlap there. And I'll just finish with for this category that we have, a final approach within it, which is that the Torah is correct and the science is correct, and both are true. So Rabbi Shmuel Friedman in Baltimore, his grandfather was a Talmud Chacham and a very established physicist, and he would come home from work and he would, his wife would have the typewriter and he would begin to recite insights that he learned in his work between the overlap between physics and Torah. And the idea here is that the Torah has it has pshat and it has sod, right? There's the revealed part of Torah and there's the hidden part of Torah. And also the science, also the physical world, physical reality, it has a pshat, so to say, a surface level. We walk around and there's a tree and we lift ourselves up on the tree and then we throw something across the ground. So these are the things that are the surface level of the physical world. We engage with it, this is what we see. And then there's science. There's the science, the deeper level, the reality within the world. The science, it's like the internal element of the physical world. And so for a person to compare the revealed part of one with the hidden part of another is not a proper comparison. Rather, a person has to take the pshat of the Torah, the surface level, this is what happened, the Torah says, on the surface level, and to compare it to our daily interaction in the world. And there everything looks nice. And then when a person wants to talk about the science, and a person wants to talk about the Kabbalah, so these are the things that overlap. The internal element, you relate to the internal element. The internal element of Torah, the sod, the Kabbalah, so that's going to be the science. And this is, a wonderful way to understand things. And, all four of these different mechanisms, all four of these ways of engaging with scientific extrapolation, I think they're all valid. They're all, in their own context, a person can apply them. I think really a person should ask his Rebbe which one to prefer, if a person has to prefer one, and and then that's the one that a person should favor. But they all have a strong source in the Torah. And finally, the fifth option is that of Avraham Avinu. So it's interesting because Hashem gave Avraham a challenge. He said, sacrifice your son. But he also said, all these great nations are going to come out of your son. So which is it? No, it's like a total contradiction. Abraham, what did he understand? How's it going to work? Right? It seems like a total contradiction, and it doesn't make sense. And it turned out Hashem had a way to make it work, but Abraham didn't know what that way was, and he just had Emunah pshuta. Right? He understood, it seems like there's a contradiction. I don't understand, but I'm limited. My mind, my ability to understand, it's limited. The only wisdom I have is from Hashem, whereas Hashem is great and can have tremendous wisdom that exceeds anything that I can think. So a person sometimes has a tendency to try to worship his mind. The Greeks, everything was about me, and it was about my mind and my intellect and my poetry. But as Jews, we understand there's a bigger picture. And often people see in life there's something that they don't understand. And then, sometime later, they actually get an understanding of what things were and how it worked in many different areas of life. Even in the learning of science, this is something a person goes through. There's two things they seem to contradict, and a person doesn't understand it, and then later Hashem grants him an understanding. And just a precedent for this, we see that Rav Yosef in Sanhedrin, Perek Ben Sorah Moreh, Rav Yosef has a certain shita, and there's a question that's asked on the shita, and he doesn't have an answer. He just, he doesn't change his opinion. He just doesn't have an answer. And so some would say, that's not rational or rationalist, right? You have a certain thing, and someone asks a question, and you have no answer. So to keep the same idea and the same opinion, so they would say that's not rational, maybe. Except, what happened after 20 plus years? So Rav Yosef became the Rosh Yeshiva. He became the Gadol of Klal Yisrael, and at that point, he came up with an answer. Hashem granted him this answer to the question, and it turns out the perspective of Rav Yosef, his opinion on this halachic matter, we hold of it. It's cited in the Mishnah Torah. This is ultimately the answer that we hold of. So I would just say it's more important to be correct than to be rational. He ended up being correct. Was he rational? Right? Really, he was rational. It's just people try to have this very narrow understanding of what rational means. They'll speak about like rationalist Judaism, and I think a person really has to see the bigger picture and to allow Hashem to be greater than our own minds. And this is a fifth approach, this Emunah Pshuta, and it's totally a valid approach in the Torah. And so we see of these 5 different approaches. Whereas science, when it comes to scientific extrapolation, there's only one answer, which is get rid of the scientific extrapolation, throw it out, So the Torah, there's actually 5 options, and one of these options is, to throw out the scientific extrapolation, to say it's no good. But there's 4 other options, and I think all 5 options, are acceptable, are founded on the Masorah. And I think we can be, very thankful that if Hashem might give us, challenges in life sometimes, there are people who feel that they struggle with certain, certain things, the Torah versus the science. So I think the first thing is for a person to understand that there's science like empirical observations, which is the essence of science, and then there's something people do, which is the scientific extrapolations, and only by the scientific extrapolations do we have such a conflict between the Torah and the scientific extrapolations. And in those cases, only one of the 5 approaches is to reject the scientific extrapolation. So I think one who would want to claim that the Torah is anti-science, I think has no basis. And I think that, there's a lot to learn from everything we see in the world, everything we see in nature, all of the physics. There's so many lessons to gather, so much mussar to take, so much beauty to be able to use this thing to come close to Hashem. And with that, I will conclude this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that it was beneficial. And just a little shtickle about perpetual creation to bring this home. So we understand now that both in the physics and in the Torah, we see that at every moment the whole world is being recreated. That the whole past is sort of, standing just in a balance of nothingness. And often in life we get caught up in the past. A person feels bad about something that happened before, or a person feels like I really screwed up and now I'm in the wrong place. A person feels trapped by the past or anxious about it. They feel like they can't become a new person because, well, this is where I started. This is where I came from. And I think that something beautiful we learn from perpetual creation, both the science and the Torah, however a person looks at it, is that the past is the past. It's ke'ilu, it doesn't exist. A person is here now. Hashem recreated the world at this moment. And where a person is today, this is where a person is supposed to be. And our only job in the whole world, we don't need to go back into the past and do this or to do that. Our only job right now is to look right in front of us and to make the right decision and to do the right thing right now. And the rest, Hashem's in charge. Hashem has the wheel. And I think, this is an idea that can really enable a person to live with bitachon and emunah, and to be peaceful for those around him, and to create a beautiful home and environment. And I just wanted to share that thought. And two things at the end here. I want to first clarify, I spoke very generally about the science changes. So what does that mean? I would, on one foot, categorize it in four ways. To say either rejection of the science. For example, we used to think that there was an ether that filled all of space, and now we think that there is not such an ether that fills all of space. There's refinement, where people measured what they thought was like a plum pudding model, like an atom as a ball of charge with little balls of charge within it. So that model, it's not that we could say it was rejected, but I would say it's more that it's been refined. An atom does have charges as part of it, right? We just understand it better. We have a more subtle understanding. There's expansion, where maybe we have this many types of particles, and we discover a new type of particle. So the number has changed, the particles have changed. So that's sort of expansion of what we know, an area where we never said anything contrary. It's just an expansion of what we know. And then there's projection, which is in the realm of purely extrapolatory procedures. And finally, I just want to cite the source that I had mentioned about the 1,000 years. So the pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Tzadi, says, Ki elef shanim beinecha, ki yom esmo ki yavor v'ashmur balayla. That 1,000 years in your eyes is like a bygone yesterday, a watch in the night. So that's the pasuk, the verse, and it's interesting because the one who says this concept of like half a day is like 1,000 years, and calculates the world to be billions of years. So who do you think it is? It is Rav Yitzchak of Akko, and he was a contemporary in the Talmud. Like a student of the Ramban, Nachmanides. So this was obviously a tremendous scholar and Kabbalist, and he said billions of years. And so we don't need to try to get the numbers precisely right, meaning like one order of magnitude in this sort of regime. A factor of 10 is very insignificant. It could be that small stars burn more quickly than we thought they did. Things like that. So a person doesn't, we don't expect that every single nakuda, every single detail of everything in creation that Hashem made, we're gonna, in this world, perfectly understand all of it. We do the best we can. But what's interesting is there are some who want to, get the number exactly right with the current estimate of the age of the universe. So some people point to the Sefer Emunah, who was also around that time, the 13th century, and he spoke about a concept of 7 cycles of 6,000 years, and this is a concept which the Arizal, he didn't disagree with the concept in general. He just thought that these 7 cycles were not physical; they were spiritual cycles, so to say. But if you do multiply things by 7, you get like 15 billion years. You're pretty much right on the spot. And this is 1300s. Where we're getting estimates of billions of years. I think that might be of interest to the listener. And thank you so much for joining.